On the programme, a gift to the nation, Éamon de Buitléar's archive at NUI Galway. Hello and welcome to Arts Tonight. Éamon de Buitléar has been close to the heart of Ireland's musical and wildlife heritage for over 5 decades. His television series Mhuí Faoin Spéir was a rich and original look at the country's natural world, memorable for its brilliant camera work, de Buitléar's calm presence and the drawings of Gerrit van Gelderen. De Buitléar's work with Sean Riada and his role in Ceoltóirí Cúlan and later Ceoltóirí Lion also distinguish him as one of the people who played a significant role in the Renaissance in traditional Irish music. All of his life has been informed by a love of music, of nature and of the Irish language. Over the years, Éamon de Buitléar amassed a large and significant collection of recordings, film and photographic footage, writings and other material associated with his work. That archive will now be preserved thanks to a generous donation by de Buitléar to NUI Galway, and a window into an already changed natural and cultural landscape will be there for scholars and public alike.
My name is Sharon Naturisk. I'm working with Active na Hallscoileach de Gaeilge, which is the main body through which the National University of Ireland Galway delivers its Irish language academic programmes. And the Éamon de Buitléar collection is extremely important to us for a number of reasons. It reflects the university's ethos for the Irish language. The National University of Galway is a bilingual university, and Éamon de Buitléar's love of the Irish language is reflected throughout the archive. It is Éamon's intention, and it always was Éamon's intention, that the collection be kept in one piece, that it not be split up into various pieces and distributed across various institutions. So if we want to fully use this archive and make it available to the public and to our students and to researchers, it's imperative that we digitise the entire collection. That's the only way that we can make it available to such a wide and disparate group of people. So that is what NUI Galway's main priority is for this collection the next year to 18 months. We will be digitising the entire collection. It's an extremely heterogeneous collection, reflects so many different facets of the nation's cultural heritage, Éamon de Buitléar's own wide and varied interests, and that's essentially what we're going to be doing.
I met Éamon de Buitléar recently at his home near Delgany in Wicklow, and we talked amid books, tapes, recording equipment, some of the material destined to travel west to a new and permanent home.
There are over 2,000 quarter-inch tapes, not to mention the larger spools, and they were taken at a time when you could go out and take absolutely clear sound, no interference in the air or in the woods or anywhere else except from the birds. So now of course it's almost impossible to get, even at 4 o'clock in the morning you have traffic, you have well, I won't say you have power saws at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you have other sounds of people going to work, which was, I mean, you would never see anybody at 5 o'clock in the morning in those years. And I'm talking about they go back to the 50s. Now, the setup, of course, with those sounds, and they can be transferred anyway, so there's no real problem with that. I had a really good sound man, Pat Hayes, and he worked for me for 8 years. Never had an argument or a fight, which was great. And he set up a connection with the desk here, straight across over to that point there, that can be brought straight over to the editor when he comes in with his laptop. So I've used sounds that you see on the shelf here, taken in the 60s and used in my last series, my most recent series. So I say they're still usable, you can use them all the time. So I mean, all these, you know, the sound stretched from there over to here.
Was this an old building outside the house that you converted into a studio?
Well, if you go back far enough, it was originally a thatched cottage, and then it was turned into a coach house. We don't have a coach or a horse, so I'm sorry to say.
But you still have these great thick walls and whitewashed walls.
Oh yeah. It was just like that. I didn't have to do an awful lot with it, and I have more film just above it here.
And this lovely low roof and rafters,
Yes,
and so you have that really strong sense of the old building, the old coach house, and
It fits my age.
well, all of the material, I have to say, seems to sit very naturally and comfortably into it. Who did all the shelving?
Well, one of my sons is he's a cabinet maker, so there was no problem in getting up the shelves, you know. But the interesting thing is, of course, that it's indexed, as you can see here. So I have a cross index. Actually, Pat made out those numbers.
And in this relatively small area, what was the coach house? It is floor to ceiling shelves, the tapes on the shelves. You have a few sound desks. So really a huge archive of material going back over about
It goes back to
50 years.
Yeah, well, the radio end of it, because I started in radio, not in television, and I was doing a series of radio programs on musicians, and at that time I worked in Healy's of Dame Street, which was a fishing tackle shop, so which brought me from the river that I grew up on into a fishing tackle shop. But I had been in another fishing shop some years previous to that, and there were all sorts of people used to come into the shop, of course, fishermen, but their real jobs were something else. And Fachno Honrachain asked me one day, would I like to submit a script for a series of radio programs using the old 78 records, that if they fell on the floor they smashed, of course. And of course...
and that was with Randy Waring.
That's right, in Henry Street. And I said yes. I didn't tell him I only had 2 records, but I said yes immediately. So I grabbed the opportunity, and he said I'd have to do a mic test, and I'd have to also, of course, write a script, and then go in, if it was successful, go in and do it, and I would present it. So that was all successful, and so the radio series started there with using traditional musicians. And then at that time, it's very difficult for young people to realise this now, but people were not listening to Irish music. It was often called Tinker's music, even in Clare, which might surprise you. But if there was a programme specifically over to traditional music, there were just a few of those programmes on radio. But you'd never hear pipes on a magazine programme or a whistle or that. So I enlisted the help of my father as well. You may have noticed that we switch to Irish here all the time, because I'm used to speaking to Lally, my wife. But anyway...
and your father, of course, was aide-de-camp to Douglas Hyde, the
first
president.
That's right, that's right. So I wrote I felt that if I wrote a series of stories with a leprechaun in it, and with his pet mouse, the leprechaun's name was Ludin MacLou, and the mouse was just Luchin, little mouse. So he was continually getting into trouble, and whenever he got into trouble, he just shouted for Ludin, and Ludin came with his magic whistle. And so I then had to enlist the help of a musician to play the tunes, but I felt that this would maybe draw children into actually listening to the music while they were listening to the story as well.
Of course it did.
Yeah, so then I asked Paddy Maloney would he like to take part, and of course Paddy was delighted. He was working up in Baxendale's, a hardware shop in Capel Street, which was not very far from Healy's. So that was how that one went.
Aye, Aludin Viclou! Taran Shah Ludin. Katata style wig. But why does it go on hut loud later Ludin? A Spanish the hut kill. A Spanish kill drichte. Pa a henna vago mar geon hut. Nach minike vi ba loud slish. Well, but why is a loud later reach there, Magan? Taran Easton Shah Ludin. Magalior Marsha. Fanan shinna the sped later geon ein noma to vine.
And of course another man who came into the shop one day was Sean O'Reilly.
He was, yeah, into Healy's. Yeah. So, I mean, the way the world goes round and incidents keep happening, you know, and then I just said to... Sean came in actually to buy a shotgun. Not that he knew all that much now about shotguns, but he wanted to buy one anyway. So, anyway, I got to know Sean then because he used to come in regularly. And so that was the beginning of something else, you know.
And I'm sure there's a lot of O'Reilly's music and spirit here.
Yeah, I mean, music that we did for the Cork Ballet Company as well. The
Denise Moriarty,
yeah,
yes.
that's right. So two of those tapes are actually... two of the 7-inch tapes there are Joan, ones that we made for Joan Maria.
For Joan Denise, yes.
Joan Denise, yeah. So, I mean, it's full of all kinds of different things. You know, Rochmas Ceol there, which is Ceoltóirí Line,
yes,
which is the group I formed after Sean O'Reilly died, you know. So there's quite a lot.
There's a wealth of music here.
And then there's all the film,
a great deal more.
you know. And then there are the scripts. I have the first script that I wrote for Mufuin Spade. I had the first script that I wrote for Ludi MacLou. So, you know, and from there up. So there's a lot of stuff here.
And Éamon, why did you want all this material to have a home in Galway? You know, you've given it to Galway University, to NUI Galway, and it strikes me that it's this great act of generosity as well to the future, to future generations, so they'll know the richness of what you have been involved in, and your work with O'Reilly, your work in the environment, and your work in the Irish language.
Well, the first thing is my life started in Galway because my father was commanding officer of the 1st Battalion for some years there. I was only a baby really when we moved to Wicklow. We never lived anywhere else really, maybe a few days or a couple of weeks before we came to Wicklow. And my father had seen some houses, some of them, though he hadn't the money to buy a house, but he could rent one. So when he came to the house that we actually came to live in eventually, he didn't, I don't think he even looked at the house. He just came into the garden, saw this weir, saw the river, saw the weir, and at the bottom of the weir this pool which held salmon and sea trout. And he said, that's where we're going to rear children. So it affected me for the rest of my life.
It's a good instinct.
Yeah. So
those roots in Galway, your father's connection to Galway,
yes,
all of those, and obviously then your wife is a Connemara woman, and
that's right.
I suppose your own love of the language, and you've clearly had happy times.
Yeah, but I wanted to keep the whole lot together. I wanted to give it to an organisation that would use it, and that young people would be able to use it. I mean, it's a life's work, and you know, if you've lived all your life at something, why just throw it away? I mean, I've seen so many, things being just discarded, and I've tried to keep some order to it, so that it can be used. Now they're also getting. This is a Nagra sound recorder. Now they were the field recorders that we used, this upper part of it here, and we used those.
Buitléar, RTE, Irish TV.
That was for the purpose of anybody when we went overseas, that they would know where we came from. So
they were the old reel-to-reel. They were very good quality.
Absolutely terrific quality on the Nagras. And the record that if I start at Ceoltóirí Hólan actually making a recording of a concert in the Gaiety Theatre in 1961, I think it was, I said to Robert McGorine, who was in charge of Gaeling, that really we would like to record this, and he said that's okay, that's fine. So they went then and did a check on the actual system in the Gaiety, and there was interference on the line, and the soundmen there said they couldn't use it. They couldn't operate on the system. So I said to Pat Hayes, my soundman, I said, look Pat, what are we going to do about this? It really should be recorded. So Pat said, just leave it with me and I'll think about it. So the next day Pat said, look, what I'll do is I'll use your Nagra recorder, which is a field recorder, and I'll borrow another one the same as it. And if you open this lid here, you can fit this 5-inch reel onto it, and you can close the lid again, which is essential if you're out in the open. So if we use 7-inch reels instead of 5-inch, I can leave the top open. We don't have to close it. And I leave one machine on standby, and I'll run your machine, and if I happen to see that I'm running out of tape and you guys aren't finished, I'll switch on the other one, so there won't be any problem in joining them up. So we did that, and that record...
That became O'Rea the Sagaithi.
Exactly, yeah.
Wonderful record.
Yeah. So that was
the treasures of Irish music.
Yeah.
And so without you and this machine, that record would never have been made.
Well, so you never know what might have happened, but anyway, we thought that might work. And Pat, he microphoned every musician on the stage, and he had a little mixer that he borrowed from somebody else, and that's how we worked it.
What do you remember about that concert? Because the power of the music, of the recording, is so strong that I often think, God, I'd love to have been in the audience.
Well,
then.
there was a terrific atmosphere, and all the tickets were all sold, of course. And Neil Toybeen I remember his voice well, and he introduced the concert. Sean spoke after that, and then De Valera was at it. So, but the atmosphere was really fantastic.
Electric.
It was great.
You feel it.
It was great.
I've been thinking a lot about O'Rea recently. I don't know, and you know, he's one of the people I really wish I had known. I never knew him. I remember the day he died. But
well, I don't think there's a week goes by that I don't think of him.
Yeah.
You know, no, it was historic times.
A remarkable man. I mean, he seems
was,
to have been several people.
He had too many to hold for his body to hold all in one place, you know.
And I often think, you know, we could never be grateful enough for what he did for Irish music and culture.
Yeah.
You know, to just
And there's so many musicians now are playing. I stopped a musician one day, I just waited till he had finished playing. He was playing an accordion, put an accordion in Grafton Street, and he played a piece of music that was introduced by O'Rea, and I said to him, that was lovely. I said, did you ever hear of Sean O'Rea? He said, no. Who's he? I suppose it's a sign of fame, really, when somebody is not even remembered, but has
that's right, it's subsumed into the greater thing, and that is what, you know, because that renaissance, that great renaissance of Irish music, so much of it goes back to what
certainly what
you all did,
group music and that, and the use of the introduction actually of O'Carlin's music, which wasn't normally played by traditional musicians. They didn't think it was traditional enough. And Sean just felt that, you know, this was great music. I mean, people should be pulled up by the bootstraps, you know, and, you know, not be thinking that the music wasn't as good, at least, as other musics. So that was really his outlook.
I presume there's a bit of Seamus Ennis in here as well, is there?
Well, yes, I did a whole programme on Seamus, and at the end of it all, I said to Seamus, now Seamus, what are we going to call this this film? He said, Miles and Miles of Music.
When Pat came over the hill, his Colleen fair to see, his whistle low but shrill, the signal was to be. Oh Mary, the mother cried, there is somebody whistling sure. Oh mother, it is the wind, you know, that's whistling through the door to my Valda de Larla, to my Valda de Larla. This is Finglas in North County Dublin. It was a small country village when I was a boy, but now it is part of Dublin and has spread itself along the country byroad as far as Jamestown, my birthplace.
I have one index here which has where's it gone? Where do I see now? Seamus. That's Pat's writing, and I did not want to use any music that Seamus wasn't playing his best or the best that I could get. So what Pat was doing while he was transferring some of this material from one tape to the other, I didn't quite know this until quite some time later. Pat was marking Seamus marks out of 10. And you can see here that he wasn't...
8 out of 10 for the kid on the mountain.
Yeah, well, I mean, 8 out of 10 wouldn't have been bad. It might have
No.
been just... And Pat had a very good ear for music, and he had actually... He had played the pipes, but I never heard him play the pipes, but he had studied them, it seems. So, any of those, you know, if they went 2 though, if they went 6 out of 10, that wouldn't be used now.
Okay.
No, we just wouldn't use it.
And Éamon, is there much of the wildlife material here?
There
from
is, yeah. Well,
looking at the reels there under the desk, and
yeah,
so
well,
they're obviously film.
That's film. But of course, a lot of these tapes have the sounds of the film music. So they could be, you know, the natural sounds are in these kind of tapes. Then we have, of course, coming up to more modern times, you have all sorts of changes in sound, and everything is quite different, you know. But the changes have been good for the most part. With modern equipment and that, it's just unbelievable what you can do now, except that some people get tied up completely in the technicalities.
Yeah,
you know.
forget the rest.
Yeah.
Did you keep or try to keep everything?
Anything that was of any value, and I'm not talking about money because there's no question of money in this handover. Anything that was of value, and I mean, there's no such thing as throwing out sound or pictures if they were anyway respectable, you know. So, no, I kept everything.
Because, of course, a lot of material was lost in many archives, including the RTE archive over the years.
Don't I know?
It's wonderful that you kept all this and that it's here. Do you, these days, I mean, do you, are you painting a bit?
A bit, yeah. But as well as that, I'm still involved in a film on the Atlantic salmon, so I'm not quite finished. Salmon are being lost at sea. We actually call this Atlantic salmon lost at sea.
Chasing the salmon.
Yeah.
It's a lovely photo of you in the autobiography Life in the Wild with a robin on your hand.
Oh,
And did you always have that strong feeling for birds in nature?
no, not really. Well, birds are a great introduction to wildlife, because it doesn't matter what time of day you go looking for wildlife, the chances are that unless you're experienced and know where to find them, you're not going to find many mammals. Most of them are nocturnal. So, or if you want to introduce children to wildlife, you know, what are you going to show them that they're not going to get disappointed within 5 or 10 minutes? There are always birds, you know, and you can go from birds to something else. No, because as far as interest in the animals were concerned, it was something that they were on the river in the first place. I mean, they had been There were herons on the river fishing on the weir. There was a herring gull permanently on the weir. How I didn't hate herring gulls after that, I don't know, because my mother used to say that this would be in September. If we weren't behaving ourselves, that gull was going to go straight back to Santa Claus, and we were finished as far as presents are concerned. So anyway, we sort of, it was just a matter of trying to fit things in, and because I used to ask my mother for books on wildlife, always for my birthday or for Christmas. So they had everything. I mean, there was, what was it? Ivan and the Wolf and that kind of thing. So not much to do with Irish wildlife.
From that as well, I mean, you know, your own natural interest in the wild, in wildlife, and then the film work you did, and I suppose all of us, I mean, I remember, I'm the generation who remember and forever admire And We've Been Spare, and it introduced so many of us to the natural world around us, and also to the you know, the language, to so much. But when you were making those programs, when you were thinking about them, did you think as well, especially in terms of and did you have an eye towards young people, towards children, and fostering that interest in them?
Well, I had, because I had done the radio programs especially for children. So, and of course, once the programs started to be transmitted, it was quite extraordinary, the number of letters and questions, and not from the children just, but the teachers who didn't have nature classes ever in most schools, and certainly I never had a nature class in schools. So it was the ideal opportunity to sort of head in that direction, you know. And Gerard van Gelderen, who worked with me, was a very good illustrator, a very good naturalist, and so it was with his really imaginative, quick drawings that you know, that filled in the gaps, especially because the very first series was totally in Irish. After that, I spoke to my father about the bilingual aspect of it, and he thought it would be a good idea to do it bilingually. Now, there are people who would be totally against the bilingual end of things, but it did draw people, very definitely drew people in. I mean, I one gentleman in the village here said to me, "Well, I didn't think I'd know any Gaelic, but I understood everything you said." Well, you didn't have any Irish, you know, but it was the link, yes, between breaking from Irish to English and then back again. I tried to bring the idea, it's difficult to write a bilingual commentary. You don't want to repeat what you've said already for those who understand both, yeah.
Bhíonn taobh seo de Éamon fáial, cho teisín cúig bliana hin de bhar an bholcáin bio phléasc sa bhliain chuige seacht nach ra cad a géing teachtain seo fiúháin chóirt. Until 10 years ago, this lighthouse stood like any other lighthouse on the edge of the cliffs, and its light guided many sailors past the treacherous rocks of Capelinos off the island of Fayal in the Azores. In 1957, Fayal was shaken by a violent volcanic eruption. There were terrible submarine disturbances, and Capelinos became a red-hot furnace as the volcano erupted. 5 years after the eruption, life began to return to Capelinos. The terns, which disappeared in 57, have started nesting here again.
And it was really groundbreaking, and I think they, you know, they were extraordinary programs, and something of which I'm sure you're still proud. I mean,
yes, yeah. Well, I'm still amazed at the number of people that come up to me and mention the Muffin Spade, you know, which was so many years ago.
Of course, your father had also made. He had written. Hadn't he done a list of all the names of birds in Irish and Latin? Had he?
Well, you see, when I got one of my first bird books, every bird book you got here was about British birds, and I used to ask him the names of the birds in Irish, and I'll show you the book now in a moment, but he wrote them down, and he gave me the name of the Irish bird, so that was useful. And then of course that drove me, I suppose you could say, in a way, to putting a dictionary together of Irish, Latin, English, Latin, Irish together. And then we worked, it was never published because, believe it or not, I sent it to Ungoom, the government publishing company, and they said they couldn't publish it because there was English in it. So
you can't win.
Work that one out if you can.
Yeah.
But anyway,
But you have that book.
Oh, I do, yeah. Yeah, but my father then was, well, both of us were invited to sit in on a dictionary of wildlife and there were various sections, one for mammals, one for plants, one for birds, and we were in on the bird one. So we were able to contribute to that. So a lot of those names in the list are in that booklet that you can actually buy. So that's how we got involved in that. But he had some experience in that from the time he joined the army. It must have been not too long after the truce that he began to work on a military dictionary of English Irish terminology for the army. So he had that. He was. I mean, he should have been working in the library really, in some ways. You know, the National Library, I'd say. But so yes, that sort of was a good beginning for him.
Well, he's here. He's here in your library as well. Very, very much so. Éamon, I'm just looking at the labels sort of on some of the tapes here. You know, natural selection bats, natural selection owls, natural selection seals, and thinking about recording wildlife sounds or recording animals and birds can't have been easy.
Well, you're in a completely different area when you try to record sounds. And Pat Hayes he wasn't a naturalist, so I had to coach him a bit. And I remember when we were up in the burn, and I said to him, Pat, would you ever take some wild sound out in that direction? Because the cameras that we had at that time were noisy. The soundman wanted to get as far away from you as he could. So Pat went off trying to take some sounds, and when he came back to me, he said, God, the birds are very jumpy around here, aren't they? You know, but no, you just had to, you had to very often hope for the best, but in some cases, for instance, if you're recording otters, you have to be downwind of the otters because you have to take scent into the factor as well. And otters, they don't see all that well. They don't have great eyesight, but they have very good sense of hearing, and of course their sense of smell. Once they get past the area where the wind changes down towards the otter rather than towards you, you really have to keep ahead. You know, you just have to keep an eye on how the wind is going. So it depends on the actual mammal, but most mammals, I mean, foxes would be the same. And the fox coming to a lair would double back and maybe come behind you without your knowing it, just to see if you're actually within, or any human smell within the area before she comes to the lair. So so you just get to know the animals, and sometimes you don't get the sound you want. But for instance, if you happen to be in areas such as Wexford, where there are thousands of say white-fronted geese from Greenland wintering here, and you take the sound on a nice quiet day, and you get terrific sounds of flocks of these geese, and then you come back again maybe a week after to try and get maybe it wasn't great from the picture end of view, the light mightn't have been all that good, But you can use that sound again that you've taken week previous, as long as you use it in the same situation, that you're not transplanting barnacle geese, thousands of barnacle geese, down to an area in Wexford where they don't actually exist in huge flocks. So you just have to know. I mean, I've had calls here asking, where would I was looking for to go out and get shots of corn crakes, and this would be in the winter. And where do you think I could go? I'd say, well, I think the best place for you to go is South Africa. I said, because they're on holidays. So,
How to get a corncrake in winter, all right.
yeah.
But I suppose again, thinking about this archive and how we take things for granted, because again, I suppose I grew up hearing the corncrake, hearing all these natural sounds on a small farm in Leitrim, and I think a lot of them are gone. And
Well, they certainly have in some areas, And I remember giving a talk. I think it was in Mayo. I'm not sure, but I was in the talk. I included the sounds of corncrakes, and it's not difficult to get sounds of corncrakes because they're moving around all the time. You can set yourself up and wait. But when I played the sounds of this corncrake, this fellow at the back of the hall put up his hand and he said, excuse me, you said that bird is nearly extinct. And I said, well, he's in some places he's extinct. I said, and he's very scarce, even in this country. And he said, sure, for God's sake, he deserves to be extinct with a voice like that.
Éamon, will you miss having this around you when it's all gone to Galway?
Yeah. Well, I will, of course. But as I say, I'm giving them the equipment. I'm giving them that Steenbeck, which was the Rolls Royce of Steenbecks, of editing machines, when we were editing on film. And there's another Steenbeck exactly the same in this next room here. Certainly the place will look a bit empty. But it's really on its way.
Éamon, in filming now, obviously technology has changed a lot, and I just wonder, again, what do you use? Digital cameras? What sort of films do you work? And I think you work a good deal with your son Cian.
Yes, film is gone. No film. All you have now is a card. You put it into. We have the newest Ariflex camera, which Cian uses for the most part. I never pushed him into film, if you can call, unless you call bringing him out with you is pushing him into film. But he wasn't going to do film, but gradually he did, and he just loves it. And so it would be Cian that would be doing the actual filming at this point. But even in that film that we made and we've made one or two that aren't directly connected with wildlife, such as Island Man, which won first prize in St. Petersburg, and it was about an old Connemara boatman. I didn't even know it had gone over. A friend of Cian's had actually borrowed the film from him and sent it to Petersburg a few years ago. And the next thing I knew, or the first thing I knew about it, was that I got an email from Cian's friend saying that an ex-Russian destroyer commander was coming to Dublin to present me with the prize. I was more interested in the destroyer's commander than I was in the prize. So he came and presented me with it, which is nice.
Always nice. Always nice.
This machine here is for transferring the quarter-inch tapes to, you play it onto, do you see the tape there on that second reel? Yeah, there's only a piece of tape left on it, but that would have been a big roll of separate magnetic tape, and it has the same diameter as film. And when you transfer, you have to transfer your sound on quarter-inch tape, which is on quarter-inch tape, onto that, and then you can play it on your Steenbeck. So that machine was actually put together by Pat Hayes.
Very impressive looking
Yeah,
machine.
yeah. It'll look impressive in Carrow where it all goes in the end. And this show of equipment and so forth, the history, because there are panels showing the actual history, is on at the moment in the Hardyman Library in Galway. So anybody who wants to go and see it, it's there for them to look at. It'll be there until I think the end of January, I think, and then it'll go to Carrow, and the digitizing and that then will be handled by the college. But the interesting thing for me was that the college has an academy, an octave as they call it, in each of the Gaeltachts, and of course they have their young people coming up and studying this kind of thing. So it'll be interesting how they will use this, because there's so many different angles, even to finishing some scripts that for Ludin that wasn't completely done, well, there were other stories after Ludin that my father was trying out, and they were just other ones for children. But after that, when television began, I transferred the use of Ludin. It was a big day for him, because he became a television star, because I did a whole series of black and white cartoons with Ludin, and then when colour came, it changed to colour.
So maybe with this new generation, by law, Ella, Ludin, it could happen. He'll be resurrected. It's so impressive, Éamon. It is really, it puts a great deal in perspective to see all this and be reminded of the richness of it.
What I've always tried to do in having somewhere to work at home is to try and keep to normal hours wherever possible, and not to be out here at 2 o'clock in the morning. Although in working with Kerrit, that was a bit different. He'd fall asleep and I'd be waiting for it to get this inspiration, which might arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning. But that was before I had my own studio. This one we were working in, it was in Monkstown. First it was in Hitch Kitchen, and then it was Monkstown. And then I decided it was time to have my own studio. And of course, Pat of course was with me all that time as well.
When will it all sail west?
Well,
from
some
here?
of it is down there already.
Yeah.
So it's and my daughter Roisin, she's actually a glass designer, and her husband Terry is a graphic artist, and Roisin actually, well, she has been in part of so many exhibitions and that kind of thing. She's really well used to organising all sorts of things. So, and she knows the history, because some of her activity in the early days was actually working with me and with John Feehan, who was a very good wildlife person. He was until recently in the Department of Agriculture in UCD. So Roisin, I would give Roisin the kind of material that I thought would be useful for the sections that she was actually working in. And Roisin then, Terry wasn't interested in looking at it until it was all placed in such a way that he could say, well, I can do that and start that. So they played a tremendous part. I don't think they really, well, I'm certain that they didn't expect to see what they eventually got in the college. It looked very well.
Back in the house, Éamon shows me that book his father gave him as a boy, the book that helped spark his interest in wildlife.
Just opened the cover.
Okay.
Turned the cover.
Oh, this is one of your books from childhood,
Yeah.
How to Recognise British Wild Birds,
Yeah.
the Young Naturalist series.
My father.
Another 1943, Éamon Og de Buitléar. Was that your father's?
That was my father's.
You see where you got the challenge?
design.
Beautiful.
So he,
Kind of Celtic design, two birds facing in opposite directions. And could almost, obviously inspired slightly by the Book of Kells, I'd say.
yeah, oh yeah.
Lovely.
So then when you turn it over, my father wrote in the Irish names, do you see? Well, now for the greenfinch and glason darach, for the chaffinch on Brickin Baha, he's ended up with a different name. He's ended up with an on Rí Rua, which is a goldfinch and Kinney Node. Some of our birds have, they might have 8, 9, 10 names.
Different parts of the country? Or,
yeah. And the tree sparrow and Gallow and Crean,
Linnet.
the linnet and Glowshach.
Glowshach,
The bullfinch, funny enough, he didn't put that down. But it's on Cochran.
Very neat inserts as well. They
Isn't
look like
it?
they've
Yeah.
been there.
If you made a mistake there, you couldn't correct it. And the yellow bunting and Weog, and then the corn bunting and Garrocht, Skylark and Yeshog, meadow pivot and Reavog Mona, yellow wagtail.
The lovely
and lots of
bullshit there.
Wee- Yeah, of course, none of that exists now. But
Yes.
I can just read off that as if it was in the modern form. And
Small.
Daragon Alt, yeah. And Hirschach and Small, yeah.
Beautiful book.
Yeah. So there you are. The book is actually How to Recognise British Wild Birds, the Young Naturalist series. So being a young naturalist, is for English naturalists.
So it is converted into a guide to how to recognise Irish birds.
Yes, yeah, because so many
Their own names.
species don't occur here. So I'll be looking at something that I'm wondering, well, do we really have that bird here?
All the owls.
Yeah, barn owl, nightjar, and tournaline. my father, he had a bit of a sense of humour. He used to call on the nightjar Ducha Dorish, which is a jar for the door. Yeah. So and a tawny owl or wood owl, we don't have that here. And if you hear sounds being used on programmes, whether they're commercials or ordinary magazine programmes and that, the owl they will pick because it has this attractive woo-woo kind of call. They'll always use a tawny owl, which of course immediately suggests, this guy's no birdman, so.
The wrong country.
Yeah. Well, they get it just off a library.
Yes.
Just take it out of a library, and so you've only to get onto the BBC library, and they've so many sounds available. But you need to be careful, because if you take a woodland sound, you're going to get sounds of birds, and many people that and they're improving all the time. Will say, well, there's something wrong anyway. Most people wouldn't know, but the trouble nowadays I find is that nature has actually become invisible. People don't see it anymore, and or hear it. So you still try and draw people into what they're actually looking at. They can walk through countryside and not notice what's just beside them.
And of course, so many young people now are looking at things online, and they're glued to computers and not out in the wild at all.
Yeah. Well, that's all very well, and you can increase your knowledge, of course. But then, if you're never out, if you're not in the woods, so you're not experiencing wildlife at close quarters, you need to see it. You need to feel it. And that's actually, we actually as human beings need it. Especially nowadays.
Something for us all to consider there. Our thanks to Éamon de Buitléar. That's it from us. Next week, we pay tribute to one of Ireland's most eminent and best loved poets and literary critics, Denis O'Driscoll, who died last month. Sarah Binchy produced tonight's programme. From all of us, good night.